I've finally taken the plunge and invested in a freelance editor, and my podcast sounds really good now. But when I listen back, I feel absolutely nothing. That message came in from a listener to this show about 2 weeks ago. She's in Leeds, she's 2 years into her show, 60-odd episodes done, and I can understand why she thinks there's something wrong with her show. I've given it a listen. I have thoughts. But what she thinks is wrong with her show might not actually be what's wrong with her show.
Podcasting Insights.
Hello, you're listening to Podmastery Podcasting Insights. I'm Neal Veglio, founder of Podnose Podcasting, 25 years in radio and audio, and for the last several of those, I've been working with independent podcasters like you on the gap between a show that sounds technically right and one that actually does something for the people listening. And that gap is what this episode is all about. Right, okay, so the sounds good but feels empty problem. Now, it's more common than most podcasters want to actually admit, and the reason it doesn't get talked about much is that the answer is one that nobody particularly wants to hear, not unless they're really into making themselves feel bad. Here's what happens. You start podcasting, and you're a bit of a mess, frankly. Your levels are all over the place. You say about 470 times in 8 minutes. You can hear a bus going past in your recordings. And all of that's fine, because that's where everyone starts. Including me, incidentally. Some of those early recordings, now safely buried in a hard drive, that I do not ever intend to plug back into anything. But they exist. They were the early learning stages of my podcasting career. So the truth is, you do get better. You sort your kit out, you treat your room, you learn to edit, you listen back, and you hear your own improvement. And it feels good, because it is good. Progress is brilliant. Progress is real. And so is identifying it. And then somewhere around episode 30, or it could be 50, might even be 20, the technical stuff stops being the problem, because you've sorted all that out. The levels are right, the room sounds good, the edit is tidy now, and when you listen back, something is still missing. You can't pinpoint it at all. It's not in your EQ chain, it's not a structural issue. It sounds like a decent podcast, exactly like a good podcast, and yet it feels a bit hollow. And here's what is actually happening. And I want to be direct about this because I watched this happen to people in radio, not just podcasting. When you're nervous, you're present. Now that sounds backwards, but if you think about it, when you're nervous, you're choosing every word carefully. Something is at stake. You're not performing at this stage. You're attempting to get something done. An attempt has a sound, a quality. There's passion to it. There's intent. And listeners can hear when someone's genuinely trying to get something across to them. And then, one day, you just get comfortable. Which is great on paper. But the problem is that getting comfortable involves losing that sense of urgency. The self-consciousness goes, which is great, but it also does some of the reaching for you. And so what's left is technically great audio from which an actual person with actual ambition, an actual enthusiasm, an actual performance nerves, well, that person's gone. Now, you're probably used to hearing people pontificate about this stuff on YouTube tutorials, and what they're missing out on is actual experience in proper broadcast training. That's something that I'm lucky and privileged enough to possess. And one of the first things they teach you is the difference between performing and talking. I mean, yeah, it sounds almost too simple to be true, but performing is hitting your marks correctly. Talking is actually trying to get something across to somebody that you care about. One of those things sounds like a podcast, the other sounds like a person. Now, in my background in radio, I was a presenter coach, and I worked with a presenter once. I'm not going to name her, because I'd quite like to not be blocked on all social media by her. But she had something happen to her over about 3 years on air that I've never really forgotten. When she started out, she sounded rough. Technically, she was all over the shop. But you couldn't stop listening. There was something compelling there. 3 years later, she was polished. Technically, she was actually better than 90% of the people on that same broadcast network. And she was hemorrhaging listeners. Nobody could quite work out why. I mean, the show sounded great, but yet it was completely empty. And what happened was, she'd got comfortable. She'd stopped trying to reach anyone with her unique personality. She was now delivering content instead of talking to someone. She'd been listening to pro broadcasters, the likes of those on Capital Radio and Heart, and she was hearing what they were doing, and she was basically mimicking it. She was trying to sound bigger. She was trying to sound showbiz. She was trying to sound slick. She was trying to sound like somebody who, at 10 p.m., was on a big network doing a big show with more than 1 million listeners. And the fix to this was something that goes back decades in radio. It's simple, it's old-fashioned, but it works. You put a photograph on the glass in front of the presenter, not a crowd, not a demographic pie chart, one person, somebody who might actually listen to that particular show, and you talk to that person, not to the microphone, not to an abstract download number, to a specific person that you can see physically and visibly in front of your eyeballs. When you do that, you stop delivering content and you start talking to somebody. And when you're talking to somebody, like a real face, even if they're not in the room with you, it changes every decision you make. The instinct when a show starts feeling hollow is to diagnose that as a production problem. You get a new microphone, you maybe buy in a new intro, you restructure the format, you hire someone like me who can tell you what your show's doing right and what your show could probably improve on. And all of that is really useful stuff if what you had before wasn't great. But I've had clients spend 400 quid on a new microphone because they felt something was off, and it was off, but the mic had nothing to do with it. Still, despite me telling them that in their podcast audit, they didn't fully believe that the mic wasn't the problem, and so they invested anyway. The truth is, the mic was fine. The problem was that they just stopped talking to people. Most podcasters, if you press them on this, I mean genuinely press them, they don't know what they want their listener to feel when an episode is over. Not what that listener will know, and not what that listener will do, but what that listener will feel. They've just been thinking about the content, the topics, the structure, how to schedule the thing. All those reasonable things that are anchored to being the creator, but they're not thinking about the listener, they who will receive the thing. And when you don't consider that thing doesn't fill the hollow. Here's the thing about this Leeds-based listener who got in touch through the Podmastery website at podmastery.co. She had got technically good enough that the emptiness was now the most obvious thing in the recording. Her listeners had felt it before she did. Some of them probably stopped coming back without even quite knowing why. And the listener subconscious does a lot of work in your relationship between yourself, the creator, and that listener. More than people realize. Her solution to this problem had been throwing money at better equipment, wondering why none of it made the show feel more alive. She'd also thrown money at more freelancers who could help her with the technical side of it in terms of the editing, the production, putting intros and outros on the content. None of it made much of a difference because it wasn't solving the core problem, the feeling part. And that's worth sitting with for a minute. Because that fix, once you know what the actual problem is, that fix is genuinely simple. All right, here's the one thing that I want you to do before your next episode. Before you open your recording tool, before you check your audio levels, before you do anything else technical, take 30 seconds and write down this sentence. This is something I used to do when I worked in broadcasting. It's something I still do now. I did it before I started recording this episode. Here's what I want you to write. When this episode is over, I want my listener to feel blank. Fill in that blank. I did it myself. The words I put in that blank were supported and enlightened. When this episode is over, I want you, my listener, to feel supported and enlightened. Just a couple of words or a short phrase. Not what they'll know, not what they'll remember or act on, what they'll feel. Reassured, curious, slightly less alone than they were 20 minutes ago, perhaps. Whatever's honest and true for your show and for your listener and the outcome you want for them and for that particular episode. Write it on a piece of paper and pop it somewhere that you can see it while you're recording. Then make every decision during that episode, every example, every pause, every moment of genuine feeling that creeps into what you're saying, in service of landing your listener in that particular place. And that's the whole thing. Not necessarily needing a new structure. Not necessarily needing a new microphone. More than likely, you're not needing to necessarily go out and hire an expensive editor. You just need to do that one sentence before you press record. Now, I already responded to the listener in Leeds, and she is now trying it out on her next episode. And if she's still listening, let me know how it goes. If you want a proper look at what else is sitting between your show and where you want it to be, head to podmastery.co, hit the Get in Touch page, and tell me what's going on with your show. I'm not going to hit you with a sales pitch, not going to try and sell you services. I just want a conversation about your specific show. And until the next episode, good luck with your continuing journey towards attaining Podmastery.